Welcome to the Festival of Dangerous Ideas podcast. FODI started in 2009 and is the original Disruptive Ideas Festival. Each year it brings to light important conversations that push the boundaries of conventional thought. In the West, we are inclined to think slavery is a problem of our colonial past. While it is illegal in all countries, it remains alive and well and is growing dramatically, with many of us unaware of how it touches our world and in some ways renders us complicit. Lydia Cacho is a Mexican investigative journalist and activist who is a courageous champion of the rights of women and girls to live free from violence. This is her 2014 talk, Slavery is Big Business.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Anne. Well, I'll stand up for a while. I've been sitting for a long time, so thank you for giving us your Sunday morning. I'm going to tell you a couple of secrets about slavery and how it goes about around the world, but I will tell you about my personal life first, so you understand why I'm so crazy and do what I do, and go after these mobsters around the world. When I was a little girl, my mom was growing up in Mexico City. My mom was a psychologist and a feminist, and she would go into slums around Mexico City and would take me, my sisters, and my brothers to take care of the little kids while my mom was working with the women and talking about their rights and stuff like that. And I kept getting really angry because all these children didn't have enough food. And in particular, I remember, I was probably 8 years old when I was trying to draw, some animals with a little boy there, and he couldn't hold a pencil. He'd never held a pencil in his life. And I couldn't grasp the idea of a child not being able not only to write, but to draw something, a little animal. So I was really angry, and I was on the way back home with my mom, and I kept asking Mom, why is this? How come we do have this and they don't? And my mom was quite crazy too, even though she was a psychologist. She kept saying, you don't like it. And I said, no, of course not. And she said, what are you going to do about it? And I said, I don't know, I'm only 8 years old. What can I do about it? And she said, think about it. So anyway, by the time I was 14 or 15, I came to this existential crisis, which is not a normal teenage existential crisis, in which I worried about boys and other things. I worried about the world, and I was really mad, really angry at my mom because she put me in such a position. So for a while there, I was really angry. So I took up judo and karate. And every time in school a bully was molesting or being aggressive to a girl, I was there to defend them, right? So one time I was almost expelled because I practiced my karate with one of the boys at the school that was really aggressive to one girl in particular that I didn't even know the girl, right? So after this happened, when I turned 18, one day I was writing in my diary and wondering what could I do with that anger. I should do something about it, right? Because this, I had like two options. One was to get into organized crime. It would be a good career, as we all know. In Mexico, it's great business. It makes lots of money. Just if you take sex slavery, for example, it makes $150 billion a year. So it's great business, of course. You can exercise all the violence you want. You can step on human rights of everybody else. And then the other option was to do something interesting that made me a better person. And I guess I was raised well enough to understand that that's what I wanted. So I became a journalist. And when I started doing journalism in Southeast Mexico, in the Caribbean side of Mexico, I kept on going to these small towns, Mayan towns, indigenous towns, to interview women, because I wanted to explain to the world how poverty and racism was affecting them. They didn't want to talk about poverty or the lack of food. They didn't want to talk about politics. They wanted to talk about domestic violence. So I remember I wrote my first big piece on domestic violence, and I went running to my editor. I was so proud. I was 23, You think you can do whatever when you're 23. And my editor was like, what is this? Are you crazy? Domestic violence is a family thing. It's a private thing. You don't write about it. So now I have to tell you that I'm 51. This happened a long time ago. And now we see, in the media, we see all the time stories about domestic violence. And most of the people will think that domestic violence is a terrible crime, right? But back then, most of the people, including judges and politicians and journalists, and a lot of people, and grandmothers and grandfathers, thought domestic violence was a private thing. So it's the same thing. When we talk about things like sex, when we talk about prostitution, we still believe that it's a personal choice and it's not our problem. And I will try to convince you on how it is your problem, what is happening around the world. When we talk about sex slavery, not only in Cambodia, or Southeast Asia or Pacific Asia that is nearby you, but also what is happening in the US, in Europe, and of course in Latin America. So after a while, after interviewing all these people, I had a radio program. And here I was talking about domestic violence and talking about the rights of women. And all of a sudden one day I'm in my tiny radio station talking about these issues, and the producer starts banging in the window, and he's just like really scared. So I thought somebody wants to rob and attack the radio station, what's going on? So I go there and open the door, and there I see like 25 women. They're standing there going like, Lydia, thank you for opening the radio. And they came in and they started talking about their lives. And then at the end they said, we're leaving our husbands, you're right. And I'm like, no, what do you mean you're leaving your husbands? They, yeah, you're right, we have rights and this is not fair, we're leaving. And then one of them, the eldest one, just looked at me and she said, oh, you're so young and sweet, we're gonna live with you. We're going to your home. And I just kept looking, and I'm like, no, you can't. I live in a tiny apartment with my husband, and he wouldn't like it. And so I told them, okay, let's go to social services and find out what you can do, because you don't want to live in a household in which your husband tells you what to do, what not to do. He rapes you, he beats you, and he mistreats your kid. So we went to social services, and I was like, I'm a journalist, see? And this is what is happening, so what are you doing about it? And she was like, oh, no, ladies, go back home, behave well, cook the meals as your husband asks you to, and stop complaining. Family is first. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, so I decided that I wanted to do something, and I gathered a group of friends, most of them were journalists, and told them we have to open a house, a big house in which women that want to get away of this kind of relationship in which the man, the husband, is the owner of the house. He takes up his money and her money in the cases that she works, and or she can go with her kids so they won't be mistreated and she can get a new life. So I opened a shelter. And I opened a big shelter, and I call it the high security shelter for battered women. And then eventually it became a center also for women that were trafficked, especially human trafficking, sex trafficking of teenagers. So I'm telling you this story because it has a lot to do with how things developed later in my life. So we opened the shelter, and I took up psychology, and I started studying trauma, and I wanted to understand exactly how a victim became a survivor. That was my goal, because I keep thinking, I see so many people in the world that I really, really admire, and they have something really interesting, is they are real survivors. They can tell their stories and they do not suffer while they tell the stories, right? So I took up psychology, I studied trauma. I could tell you everything about post-traumatic stress. And then one day I'm working on an assignment outside Mexico City, and I get attacked. And this guy tried to kill me. And I I really, really understood for the first time in my life the difference between theory on violence against women and reality, and how you go through it, and what it means to have people around you to rescue you, to help you go through the trauma and survive it. So there was my mom, my dad, my brothers and sisters, and everybody was there to make me feel safe. Everybody was there to let me know that I didn't deserve the attack, that I was not guilty for the attack, and that I could get over the fear. And I did, so I did. I worked at it, and I did. And then I guess, as it happens, it got me prepared to face the real mobsters that I faced later in my life. So in 2003, I met this young woman. She just escaped a network of sex trafficking in Cancun, Mexico. A hotel owner, very, very famous and rich guy, had a beautiful, big, 5-star hotel, oceanfront in Cancun, and he was exploiting children sexually. He was doing child pornography, and he was bringing politicians and businessmen that like to have sex with children to his hotel. He was doing two things. He was taping the children, training them to be sex slaves for these people. His wife was his partner on this crime. And he was taping everything that happened in the parties he organized. So there he was, he had these tapes, videotapes, of him and all these politicians then having sex with the children. And some of these politicians are governors, some are senators, and some are congressmen. And when this little girl told me her story, I started investigating. So I found the names of policemen, and then I got there and I got some of the tapes. And I started getting death threats. And this guy, Jan Sukarkuri, called the office at a magazine. I was an editor back then. And he said, I'm Jan Sukarkuri, he identified himself, and he said, you're gonna die, so stop messing with our private issues. And I said, sure, of course I didn't stop messing, so I published a book called Demons of Eden. And the book, Demons of Eden, I thought it was gonna sell like 2,000 or 3,000 books, and I thought this is good because these guys will be exposed and that's it, right? So I sat down with all my family, my father, my brothers and sisters, and I told them, you know, I'm going to publish this book, it's about these guys, and I'm naming the names of governors, of the National Police Secretary, I'm naming, of course, the traffickers, the pornographers, and I'm explaining how these crimes are perpetrated and who are responsible, and I'm giving voice to all these children that were wonderful enough to tell me their stories. So this is dangerous, and my dad said, how dangerous? And I said, very, and he said, okay, go for it, we're with you. This is something you have to do. So I did. I presented the book, and then the day of the book presentation, in Mexico we have really big book presentations. So the day of the book presentation, I called, that day in the morning, I called the chief of police, the good chief of police that was fighting organized crime on federal level in Mexico. And I told him, we're going to have a book presentation on Demons of Eden. And he said, I just read it, and I'm going to send a couple of policemen to guard you while you have the presentation. I said, that's fine and dandy. And when we arrived to presentation, we had 50 fully armed policemen surrounding the center where we had the presentation. So everybody felt quite safe. We had the presentation. And 5 months later, I get to my office, I arrived there. Back then, I already had 3 federal guards supposedly guarding me because I had all these death threats from all these mobsters and politicians that were really, really angry at me for messing with their personal business. So I got out of my car, and a car came in, just like in the movies, and these guys came out of the car running towards me. One of them put a gun on my arm, and then the other 2 cars closed the street. And then my guards were standing there like idiots, just looking at me like this. And then the policeman, the guys that came to me, the gunmen, were just wearing civilian clothing, right? So I didn't know who they were. I thought they were part of the mobster group. So one of them said, tell your guards not to take their guns out because everybody will be killed. So I just yell at them, no guns. So these guys take me in a car for 20 hours from Cancun to Puebla, which is 2,000 kilometers away. And all through those 20 hours, what they wanted me to do was either to choose. I had a choice again. And the choice was I would either get killed on the way and then disappear, and nobody would know anything, and nobody would be guilty. As in Mexico, there's no rule of law in most of the cases, so I would just be one more disappeared crazy journalist messing with really, really bad guys. So the other choice I had was to sign a document they had with them. It was a legal document in which I was supposed to admit that all the contents of my book, Demons of Eden, were false, and that I wrote that book because I really wanted to get the attention of the world. And I said I won't sign that document. And then after probably 16 hours of torture, one of the policemen got a phone call. And it was the governor of Puebla, who's the guy who ordered my arrest, my illegal arrest. I call it illegal kidnapping. And he ordered my arrest, and he called the guy and said, bring her alive. So when the policeman took down his cell phone and said to the other guy in front of me, we have to bring her alive, I was so happy you cannot imagine. I was like, yes, something good happened. And I'll tell you what happened. I mean, before this kidnapping, I knew I had all these death threats, right? And when you're a good journalist, when you're a good reporter, you're trained to be safe, to take care of yourself, and to tell others what to do in case something happens. Something meaning from getting shot to getting death threats to disappearing or to getting killed. So that's what I did. I prepared my team at the shelter and my team at the magazine. I talked to everyone and I told them, if something happened, this is what you have to do. You call Amnesty International, you call Human Rights Watch, you call my husband, of course, and you call everyone and you let them know what's going on. So that's what happened. As soon as I was arrested, the policeman that got me didn't know that I put video cameras outside my office. So if you're interested, you can go on YouTube and you put Lydia Cacho's kidnapping and you can look at it via YouTube. So these guys didn't know that. And so I get there alive, and then the media interview me, and they put me in jail anyway, because that's Mexico. And they put me in jail anyway, and I went through a trial for a year. They wanted me to stay in jail for 20 to 30 years. And the charges against me were criminal defamation and libel. Because the law in Mexico used to say, it changed, thankfully, thanks to my case in part. But the law said that if I write, for example, if somebody comes into a bank and robs the bank, and you write an article in the newspaper saying the name of the person who robbed the bank, who you saw rob the bank, who is on tape robbing the bank, and he hasn't gone through trial, then you're defaming the robber. So this is exactly what happened with this guy. He said, even though I had the videotapes, even though I had the proof that he was doing child pornography, even though I had 200 photographs of these men, very prominent men, businessmen and politicians, having sex with 4, 6, and 8-year-olds, I was the one in jail. So going through the trial, I ended up being able to finish the trial outside of jail. So one day, I'm there, and for the first time in my life, I'm going to confront this guy. Kamel Nassif is his name. He's a tycoon. He's a millionaire businessman. He has factories that manufacture clothing for everyone. They used to manufacture things for Disney. They used to manufacture them for Gap, and we were able to stop these companies to buy things from him. So anyway, he's there, and all the children that I interviewed were so afraid of this guy. They told me he was very cruel, very aggressive, he was terrible to them, and he was very dangerous. They all thought he was gonna kill them if they talk, because he kept saying so. And one of the girls from El Salvador died, so they were sure he would kill them. So I'm there, I get to the place, to the trial. Inside jail, there's a small room. It's nothing like it happens in Australia or on the BBC TV. In Mexico, it's imagine just a tiny room like this, and then you have a secretary with a computer that is chewing gum, and then the judge is a guy that goes like walking like this, you know, dressed like a civilian, and then it's messy and there's nothing proper there. So I go in with my 2 lawyers, and I see this guy, Kamel Nassif, for the first time in my life. And he's tiny. And I'm wearing high heels, like the ones I'm wearing now. And I see him, and he's so angry. And my lawyers go in, and they said, we have to talk to the judge. So they went in the chambers with the judge, and so was his attorneys. They go all together. And here we are with the secretary chewing gum, and then this guy is standing there looking at me like he hates me. And I don't know why, but I just went towards him like this. And I look at him and I said, Kamel, every time you look at my eyes, the eyes of every child you've abused will be looking back at you. So when I finish doing this, he goes back to the wall, and the secretary is just looking at me like this, going like, no way. And the judge comes out running with the lawyers because they saw us through the window. And my lawyers come like, Lydia, what did you say? What did you say? Because I was the one in trial, right? Not them. So I said, nothing. And his lawyers came to him and they said, Kamel, what did she say? What did she say? And he just kept quiet for a while. And he looked at me and he said, nothing. And I thought, he's afraid. That is why I am a journalist. We are looking at him. Everybody knows his name in Mexico. Everywhere he goes. Waiters spit on his food in restaurants, I've been told. People hate him everywhere. He cannot be in a restaurant without people telling him he's a pedophile. He was going through this. And then he was going to trial too, afterwards. I took him to the Supreme Court, and him and all the other politicians involved in the network. So I kept thinking, if we have this guy that is very famous and he's losing all this money, because that's why he took me to trial. He wasn't taking me to trial not only because I exposed him as a pedophile and because he was part of a sex trafficking network in Mexico with children from everywhere, from other countries in Mexico. But he was also angry because he was losing a lot of money because of what I did, because people started mobilizing everywhere. So I got emails from people in the US, in Europe, telling me Kamel Nassif has businesses in Shanghai, and he's working with this and that, and he's, sending me evidence of everything, and I kept publishing everything. So all these famous stores stopped buying things that he manufactured. And I started understanding how we network, see? Because not everyone is going to go after the mobsters or the traffickers. Not everybody will go after the corrupted politicians that are protecting sex traffickers around the world. But we can certainly go after them from the place where we work. It doesn't matter what we do. If we're politicians, if we're students, if we're teachers, academics, you name it, you can do something about it. If you really think creatively from your standpoint of view. So I get Kamel Nassif's story, and I I go to a conference in Mexico, and all the people kept asking me, how do these guys bring the girls from the US, for example? Because I was able to gather evidence of a phone call between Kamel Nassif and Jan Zucarcuri, the owner of the hotel. And Kamel was asking him to bring a virgin girl from the US. And he was saying he wanted a little girl. And he was saying that he really, really wanted him to make sure that she was a virgin, because 13-year-olds nowadays have sex, so he needed a virgin. And the guy said yes, and he said, how much is it? And he said, $3,000 plus the expenses and the paperwork, meaning the passport and everything else. So I kept thinking, this guy is paying $3,000 for a girl from Miami to be brought to him because he wants to have sex with a child. So I got that audio tape and I published it, of course. And it was on the radio in Mexico, and he was really angry at me, so I kept getting all these death threats. So I decided to go after many bad guys. I wanted people to understand how they network, how they work together, how the businessmen and the politicians and everybody in between that is protecting people are creating a business, a tremendously big business, which is called slavery. And now we know that 30,000 people are being exploited only in Mexico every year. And 30 million people are being enslaved around the world right now as we speak. It's a great business. It gives them a lot of money, not only pleasure, but also money. So what I did was I followed the story from one young girl from Venezuela that was sold into a brothel in Mexico. And from there I followed the story of a young girl from the US who was sold to the Yakuza in Japan, and so on and forth. And then in one of the chapters of my book, Slavery Inc., what I decided to do is to interview the clients. Because I kept thinking, these guys really make a lot of money because they have someone that is asking for these young women. And they're asking for younger and younger women. So clients of prostitution around the world are looking for younger women. Nowadays, your typical prostitution client from Australia to Europe to Latin America wants a woman that is younger than 25. And then I also investigated how many internet sites of pornography we have in the world. Countless. The experts kept telling me probably 15 million. Another expert said, no, it's like 200 million pages of pornography. And then I wonder how much of that pornography that we have, for free on the internet is teenage pornography. 25% of all free pornography that you can see right now on your computer, on your mobile, is teenage pornography. And guess what? It's free. And guess what? Most of our children will watch pornography twice a week. By the time they are 20, they will watch pornography, teen pornography, twice a month at least. And I'm not only talking about boys, I'm talking about girls too. Why is this important? Because it's linked to the business. I'm not going to moralize. I think I love sex, like every other person. I think eroticism is wonderful. I think that we should all enjoy loving erotic life, or at least very fun if you don't fall in love with a person. But what I'm sure is nobody deserves a sex life with violence. Nobody. And what we watch in pornography most of the time is a lot of violence. Submission, playing submission, playing control, playing rape, imitating rape. And that's what the kids are watching. Who's making that pornography? Have you asked yourself? I know this might be a crime in some countries, of course, like Thailand or Cambodia, if I talk about it, but I do talk about it. If you're a parent or a grandparent, or if you're planning to have children eventually, just go on the internet and put teenage sex, teenagers having sex. You'll be surprised what you watch. That is what they are watching. And these kids that are on that computer screen are real kids. Who is taping them? Not only criminal networks, some of their friends. So what we are understanding is that slavery is such a big business, not only because it's there in Cambodia and these awful, of course they are awful, brothels, or in Mexico and in many, many countries around the world. It's also good business because we are here being witnesses of how normalization of violence against the world is being given to our children and to us. We're not even questioning that, right? Because, for example, in Victoria here in Australia, when they decided to legalize prostitution, the discussion was, okay, if we give women a choice, they will choose to be prostitutes. Of course. And if they have a choice, then we will fight slavery, we will fight them up. It's a lie. 10%, probably here in Australia, 15% of women are in prostitution because they can't get in and out of it. What about the rest? What about Aboriginal women that have been raped and abused since they were little girls? And then by the time they were 16, they thought it was the only way and the only trade they knew about. We're very hypocritical around the world when they discuss these issues. Because sometimes we don't want to sit down and really talk them down. We sit down and decide that the discussion around the world right now on sex trafficking and on prostitution is legalize it. It's like legalize war. Let's sell them guns and kill a lot of people, go invade Iraq, go invade Afghanistan, you know, it's good business. Kill people and then you'll make a lot of money out of it. Well, that's pretty much the same dynamics we're seeing with slavery. It's like, sell them this. This is cool, you know? So when you discuss prostitution and sex trade around the world, including, of course, Australia, you have to look at the clients. So what I did was I went to all these brothels around the world, following the cases and different trails of the different mafias. And in order to get in, I had to, of course, I'm a woman, so the only way to get into a brothel is either as a prostitute or as a madame that is looking for a younger woman, and I couldn't do that. So I dressed up as a prostitute. A friend of mine that is very good at dressing people up, he did that. He trained me to walk in a certain way with really high heels, and I got in. I infiltrated some nightclubs that I knew for sure had teenage girls. And I found clubs in which they have 12 and 13-year-old girls. In Dominican Republic, in Mexico, in the US, in Japan, in Cambodia. And then I also had to dress as a nun. Because there is an area in Mexico City that is incredibly dangerous, that is absolutely controlled by the traffickers, and the policemen are protecting these traffickers. And the only people that can go through those streets inside and through the motels where the clients go and have sex with young women are the nuns, because the nuns work nearby. And they would bring food to some of the women and some of the children. So I did dress up as a nun. I asked one of the nuns to help me, and here I was, you know, walking with my rosary, very, very nervous. And then one of the traffickers, one of the pimps, he looks at me, he goes, "Say you, sister." And I was like, shit, he recognized me, what am I gonna do? And he goes like, "Give me your blessing, you have good, nice eyes, you know. I can tell you're a good person." I'm like, yeah, sure, you know. Like. So I did. But anyway, what I was able to do is I was able to see and count how many little girls were there in the brothels. Only in that area, a very, very small area in Mexico City, I found 140 little girls younger than 10 years old that were exploited sexually. And the police cars were outside there protecting the pimps. So I document this, and you can read in the book, in Slavery, Inc. And then I wanted to explain to people how clients thought So I go in one of these clubs, and then I'm sitting in the bar, having a beer with some of these clients, and they're from Europe. They're in their 40s, some of them, most of them, quite handsome. All of them were married, and were doctors, journalists, writers, and one of them was an Interpol policeman. And they're there as clients, right? So I'm dressed up with these fancy clothes and these big eyelashes and all the thing that you wear to look like prostitute, like a fancy prostitute. And I told them, I noticed that the girls there are so young, so I'm so old to be here. They want, I'm gonna blow my cover, right? So I tell them I'm retired, I'm retired and I'm here just for old time's sake, just like remembering when I was young and happy and whatever. And they were so glad to meet me. They were like, oh no, you could still turn tricks, you still have a good body and everything. And I'm like, yeah, sure I do. And so I was able to interview them. And the reason why I was able to interview them is because I was objectified by them. They thought I was a prostitute, then I was no danger at all, right? If I said, well, here I'm a journalist and I'm interested in human rights and I write about organized crime and I'm really, really worried, I'm an expert on money laundering, they would, of course, kill me. So they told me all their stories and I wrote one chapter specifically on the clients. One of them caught my attention in particular, and I kept listening and hearing this story over and over again in many countries. It was a European man, and he said, I'm happy. My wife is fine, it's okay, she's beautiful, I have these kids, and everything is okay at home. But I don't know what happened to European women. They lost the pizzazz for sex. They're not good at it. They want to control it. They want to tell you when they want to have sex and when they don't. I'm like, really? Oh, no. And he say, yes, and I like Latin women because they're so submissive. They're so obedient. They're so sexy. They still know who the man is in the relationship. And when he was telling me that, I was remembering some judo moves and just smiling at him. So that was really important to me. This guy did me a wonderful favor because that was a question I kept asking around the world to European and American and Mexican men. Why do you go to these places? Aren't you aware that these young women might be enslaved? Aren't you aware that these young women might be doing this because they have nothing else to do? And they could have a happy, joyful, free sex life, but not being enslaved like this and forced to have sex or rape or the kids taken away in order to pay a debt. And what they said was, no, we miss the way women were, and we like this, how manhood feels like. And I think that's one of the biggest secrets of the sex slavery industry. Men. This has become, sex slavery and slavery in general in the world, has become a tremendous burden to human beings. But it has become a tremendous problem for women in every country in the world. Because 93% of all NGOs that work to rescue girls and boys and women, who work on psychology groups to help them to go through the trauma of being enslaved, are women. Are women that have a career, that have a life, and then on top of that, they are activists because they want to change things. And then some men feel really, really deep for these women. And most of them will tell me, Lydia, we need more women like you in the world. And I always answer, so get ready if any of you wants to tell me this, we need more men like me in the world. So, yesterday in Melbourne, somebody said sex slavery is a women's problem. And I said, it has become a women's problem because men are not working with us to end slavery. Of course, you're not going to go follow the traffickers. You're not going to investigate on their money laundering. There's people like me who are doing that, and some of these guys, thanks to our work, are in jail now in different countries. But you can change things. The male population is not only co-responsible for this terrible crime around the world, but it's also co-responsible for not doing anything about it. We do have laws. In Australia, you have wonderful laws against trafficking, of course. You do have laws against child pornography. If you, most of you must know about this. You have a cyber police, which is very good as the one in the UK, which are the best in the world, probably. But probably 1 out of 1,000 people has ever talked about child pornography on the internet and what it means and what it's doing to the children, not only in your country, but in other countries. And how many people that you know might be unaware that their kids, their children, the teenage kids are watching child pornography. They might be committing a crime in Australia because it is a crime to watch child pornography. But what if you're a child? Is it a crime? If you're 11 years old and you go on the internet and you tweet something and then there's this tweeter, a pedophile that is tweeting all these photos, sex photos of children. If it's a kid, is he or she committing a crime? And why is he or she committing a crime? We're not discussing this. We just think it's the mobsters back there, or the guys in Cambodia, or the ugly pedophiles going to Thailand to look for little girls and boys, which is true. That is happening. But then this is the things that are happening at home are the things that we can act upon. Australia has a group, a very small group of men that are working on masculinity. I found them on the internet, and it's very strange because I kept talking about this on the media. I did like more than almost 30 interviews in Melbourne in the last couple of days, and it's quite strange. Nobody has ever heard about the masculinity group in Australia, these men that are working with boys. So that tells you something about your media, your local media. What are you doing? Are you finding out what masculinity is? Are people working on this? Are you a father? Are you a man in general? And are you willing to set an example for other boys? What I learned doing all my investigations is that more than 90%, according to studies, of all pedophiles were raped and abused when they were little boys. Nobody ever rescued them. Nobody listened to them. Nobody paid attention to them. Nobody talked openly about it. Now we are. Thankfully, we are around the world talking about child abuse in many ways. But we are not working against it. Most of the abusers in the world, the ones that are just making these guys rich, are not seeing themselves in the mirror. And a part of my job, one of the reasons why I was invited here, is to talk about dangerous ideas. So here's a dangerous idea. Let's talk about masculinity everywhere we go. Let's read about masculinity, what it is to be a man, what it is to be owner of your own body. Feminists have talked for years and years about sexual and reproductive rights of women. And that's wonderful. We now know we own our bodies. And I don't know how many men know that. How many men are trained since they were little boys to own their own bodies, to own their sexuality, to own their eroticism, to learn how to love each other, to love themselves, to treat themselves well, to enjoy sexuality not only through their penis but through their entire being, to love their sexuality through communicating and having relationships with people. They exchange emotions and body and fluids. We're not teaching them that. So why are we so surprised that this crime is still ongoing and growing everywhere around the world? Women did our homework. We are owners of our body, of our sexuality. We're owners of our rights. We try to fight for them. We try to teach our kids, boys and girls, to think differently about women. But men has not. They have not. You have not done your homework. And that is the best way to change the world, to take slavers out of business. That is a dangerous idea. Let's rebuild the notion of masculinity. And then all the mobsters like Kamil Nassif or Jansukar Kuri, who is now in jail, purging a sentence of 112 years because he raped all the children I wrote about. Some of them are in jail. Some of them are not. Let's stop the business. You can do it. You can do it in Australia. You can do it everywhere. Everywhere you go, all the people you influence over. It doesn't matter if you're in a business, if you're a teacher, if you're a journalist. Let's do it. Let's just think outside of the little box. Let's rebuild the notion of masculinity, and then you will change the world. Thank you.
This session was recorded live at the Sydney Opera House. The Festival of Dangerous Ideas is presented by the Ethics Centre. The Ethics Centre delivers programs and experiences designed to bring ethics to the centre of our life. We offer counselling for individuals, consulting, leadership and development services. As a non-profit charity, we rely heavily on donations to continue our work, which can be made via our website. Thank you.